Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Good to see so many people here in the live chat already. Yeah, I'm really excited about this conversation. I've had a lot of requests over the past year since I've been doing the channel to always keep getting lots of females on, and I've done pretty well, I think, at balancing it. But one thing you've noticed that I've been doing recently as well is panel discussions, and what better to then bring some of my good friends together who I've had on individually and on other shows, and just have a Women of Ufology panel, and like, let's hear this aspect of it that we don't always hear as much as some people would like. And I think that it's time that they kind of were given more of a voice in this sort of male dominated world. So please keep the chat cordial. If you don't mind, I'd appreciate it. If anybody wants to ask any questions, please pop them in capital letters, and I'll get to see them. Yeah, so I think that was everything I was going to say. I'm still a little bit dopey after COVID, so you have to bear with me a little bit. Yeah, let's bring everybody in. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Pricilla Stone. Pricilla, how are you doing?
Doing great. Glad to hear you're doing better, but the COVID fog is real because I had it last year. So I totally get it. Thanks for having me, and I'm excited to see everybody.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Next up, we have Katie Howland. Katie, how you doing?
Hey, Vinny, doing great. Always happy to be on the channel, and thanks for putting this together.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure. Next up, we have another returning guest, Miss Brit Barbieri. How you doing, Brit?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, everybody. Excited to be a part of this panel today. Thanks.
No, thank you for coming. If you have any technical issues, Brit, just drop out, come back in, and it's always no problem at all. Finally, another good friend of mine, good friend of the show, Steph Lizabeth. Steph, how you doing?
Wonderful, and so great to see you ladies all together on Vinny's channel. Thanks so much for putting this together.
No, like, the pleasure's all mine. We've had a lot of good conversations individually, behind the scenes, on the channel, and so this is just an extension of that. And I think a lot of people are really going to dig this one. So yeah, let's jump straight in. I'd really be interested to hear from you guys how it's been for you being kind of in the kind of public eye in ufology rather than kind of behind the scenes and stuff. And I'd just like to hear how your experiences has been and changed, if it has changed over time. Pricilla, let's start with you.
Okay. I was like, do we raise we need a button, me, like buzz in. Yeah, so I mean, I've been following this my whole life, literally since I grew up in a paranormal household, and the UFO thing happened in kindergarten, as most people that know me know. But being public about it was totally kind of like a shock. Like, first, I came out of the broom closet as a witch in 2014, and that was kind of like, holy cow, like I'm gonna get burned. Like, I don't know what this fear comes from, with like
Reality.
I don't know, weird, right? Maybe the Inquisition and being Native American lineage. Anyways, but the whole UFO thing kind of happened on accident. And like coming public happened. It just happened like organically, as they would say, even though we know organically means many things. But I don't know. I never thought I'd talk in front of people. And right before Vinny kind of like, he shared one of my, I randomly shared a UFO post, and then he shared it, and I was like, who's this guy? And then I was like, whoa, he's got all kinds of cool stuff. And that's kind of how it started, realizing that there's this whole community. I was terrified of Twitter. I didn't have a Twitter. I was terrified of public speaking. Some guy told me that, like, I got a reading one time, and he's like, you're going to be talking about UFOs to people. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I hate public speaking. So, so here I am, doing it anyways, I guess. And I don't sound like my voice is shaky or anything, I don't think. So yeah, so far it's been very welcoming. It's been very freeing. It's been a beautiful time to be involved in it, seeing all this amazing stuff happen and meeting all these beautiful people. There has been some, some jerks here and there, but I guess that's expected once you join Twitter. It's just like an initiation process, mostly revolving around the way females look, like how they present themselves, like visually, is the only time I've ever run into anything. But I love it here, and I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to stay here and keep helping the subject move forward.
Excellent. Katie, on to you.
Yeah, well, I guess kind of similar to Pricilla, I never like intended to join the UAP community. My background was kind of working in the foreign policy field in DC, and had like 200 Twitter followers that I like to tweet about genocide to. So I was like super popular, and tweeted about something I was putting together with Chris Mellon, and kind of found myself embroiled in this lovely and terrifying at times community. My experience has been mixed, honestly. I think I've met some of the most open and just encouraging and supportive people on here, like people I know will be like truly lifelong friends. And that's what I focus on, because that's rare to find anywhere, much less like on the internet. I get to meet some of them this week, which is so exciting. Pricilla, speaking of. And I think that, you know, the challenge is that there are some less than kind individuals. I think that everyone gets that on Twitter, but I do think that women tend to get it a little bit more. And, you know, that's why I think events like this are important, because I think when we're talking about like the notion of reality, it's important that we expand the perceptions and the perspectives that we have to talk about that, because we come from very different backgrounds and experiences. And so that's why I'm so grateful for you, Vinny, and for, you know, forums like this. So really excited to hear what everyone has to say.
Awesome. Thank you. Steph, let's go on to you.
All right. Well, I run UAP Experiencers, and my family and I witnessed a black triangle craft hovering and following our car back in 1985. And it, over the years, has been spoken upon throughout our family, but in privacy. And come about 2020, you know, we had a big event then, it began to weigh on me. And so as that happened, I did find these different outlets such as Vinny, Danny Silva, a couple of people who just were very open to the topic. And so as I started to, you know, decide, well, I really feel that this is an important subject to speak on, because there were multiple witnesses, and, you know, if there's 4 people that had seen it, then I think that it's pretty real. And also coming from an aerospace background, I feel that I have to expound on that, because we did grow up around aerospace, you know, airplanes and helicopters and what have you. So I felt that it was important to speak on. And now I provide a platform for people who have experienced you know, UAP, even paranormal is starting to come to the forefront, where I think that a lot of these conversations are really going to start putting these pieces of this puzzle together, because I do think that there is some relation to all of these subjects that we're all so interested in. So I'm happy to provide the platform. What I'm noticing is, yes, I noticed the Twitter drama, if you will, and I do intend to stay back from that. I'd like to, you know, keep this as serious as possible. I do think that it's something that, you know, needs to be taken with a high level of seriousness. And I understand that there has been a novelty to this subject throughout the years, and I would like to see that change. What I do really notice the most is I think that there needs to be a better protocol, one for identifying UAP, second, reporting, a proper reporting system, and then also that witnesses are directed for proper treatment or therapy. And that's what I'm noticing. So glad to be on board. And, you know, I hope to continue the conversation, and, you know, we're all here to learn. There's something new every day.
Absolutely, yeah. Now, Brit, just
Yeah.
before you speak, you've been actually kind of in this for probably a bit longer than all of us here, and you've even been on, like, done the sort of TV shows and stuff. So you really have, you know, been out there for everyone to see. So yeah, I'd be interested to see how that has been for you over the years.
I mean, honestly, like growing up, I was never, you know, in my household, we always were very open about any experience we had, whether it be paranormal or UFOs. I remember my uncle, my mom talking about the UFOs they used to see all the time in Arizona and out west and things like that. So for me, it was kind of like, you know, the only thing that always bothered me growing up was that people just kind of poo-pooed it away like it wasn't a real thing. It was kind of just this weird folklore that wasn't a real thing. And I just was like, no, it is. And so I drove forward with it. And even if I like tried to drift away from it, it always brought me back into it. And then getting into it from the level that I'm at is, you know, it's a difficult position, because I work a lot with hotspots and major locations that really deal and see these things quite often. As far as even, I deal a lot with USOs, a lot of objects that are being seen in the water with different types of boat captains and things like that. And it's just really fascinating to me. And then, of course, being able to, dive in the ocean and find things that just don't make sense as far as sounds. And, the NOAA always tries to come out with whatever they can to explain stuff away. And sometimes they just can't. And of course, right now, what we're dealing with is, and I just want to say, I stay away from the Twitter. I'm on Twitter. I have like 20 followers. I'm not going to lie. I have like nothing because I just don't actively work on it. And I get very frustrated with people. There's the bullying. There's the, I know more than you, so I'm going to put you down, and it's like, you don't know what we do behind the scenes. All we're doing is either retweeting something that we agree with, or we're just putting out a quick comment of some really cool news update that we want to share. And for some reason, somebody feels it's okay to just lash on you, even if you're a woman. I'm sure you guys have felt this too. It's like, oh, you don't know anything. You're a woman. Shush. It's like, okay. So I stayed away from that. I agree with Steph. I'm trying to keep it very, with all the congressional hearings that are in place and a lot of movement going on in-house within the government and a lot of reach out. I've been reaching out to the government, trying to request certain things and details that I want to move forward with, and sightings and stuff like that. I mean, we're getting to a point now where our sightings have increased, where it used to be you'd get a couple a month, you're like, oh, this is great. Now it's daily. I'm getting daily reports that are coming in from airspace, and from the ocean and from overseas. And so when you get this heavy amount that you can easily, out of like probably 6 out of the 10 videos you get are legitimate, the other ones can be explained. You sit there and you kind of go, okay, what is really going on and why is this happening? And I do think there's a difference between many of the vessels. I think some of them are coming from the ocean. Some of them are coming from outer space. And I think each one has a purpose, and it's basically logging all that. So, which most of you know, some of you may not, my production partner and investigator in crime is Ben Hansen, and we work together very closely. We do everything together. We do reporting together. We have a lot going on. He has a couple of stuff that we're working on right now that we can't even discuss yet because it's going to be coming out, that we're going to be promoting. But he does have a current video up on his YouTube channel, which I encourage everyone to please go see, in regards to a pilot report. And these things are happening, and it's extremely incredible what's being seen. And so, I always get really frustrated, which I'm sure Steph probably has too, when you get these people are like, oh, I know what that is. That's da-da-da. And you're like, no, you're wrong. Because we've got pilots that have been doing this for years that are saying, look, I've been in this airspace. I know planets, I know stars, I know, flares, I know drones, I know these things that happen at night, and everything has to be logged in a system when these things are, taking place in our airspace. So if it's not being logged, it's not in there. You can't track it. You can't target it. It is something unknown. It is a UFO, and I know they want to call it a UAP, but it's still a UFO, especially when our last congressional hearing came out and basically said, listen, we know it's a tangible object. Okay, then stop putting it under UAP. Go back to what it was. It's a UFO. Which I've had that discussion with Vinny before. I refuse to call it a UAP.
Oh, thank goodness. Thank goodness. I do it. I make like a joke. I'm like, it's UAP if you're fancy, because that's what all the people are like calling it. I understand the removing of the stigma, or trying to, but it's still exactly what you said. Even if it's like an orb, it's still something tangible. Do you know? So I totally agree with that, and I'm happy that you stick with it.
Oh yeah, I'm a fighter.
Do you agree that they rebranded it to get rid of all of the information that they've redacted over the years? I mean, they're trying to erase what had already happened, and here we are doing what we do now, and nothing's stopping us. We're gonna continue to fight this. So I'm with you. I like the UFO. I may go back to that.
I'm hell bent on it. I won't change. I won't change.
That's right.
I mean, I'll tell you straight up, from like working in DC, I don't think it has anything to do with any of us. I think it has to do with political cover to be able to start putting these things into legislation. I think if you ask a congressman to do a UFO amendment, they're going to get skewered. If you ask them to do a UAP amendment, they have a little bit of cover. So I think it's a lot more to do with that. But I agree, it's really silly for those of us who are actually in the thick of it, either as experiencers or researchers, to use the fancy term.
Yeah. I like both. I'll always use both.
What is the newest one, right? Isn't it? I always mess up
don't.
the UAOP. Like,
Yeah, it just
you up.
becomes
No.
yeah.
AIMSOG and you up and all that, you know.
It's
They
too
keep
much,
changing
isn't
it. I can't keep up with it. It's like an alphabet for UFOs. I'm like,
Right.
what's it gonna be this week? I don't know.
know.
Screw it. It's a UFO, people. Just call it what it is.
Thank you.
Stop renaming it.
It's funny because each time the office gets a new name and an acronym, I just about learn it, get it down,
Right.
and then they bring out a new one. Like we've just heard they're going to rename the office at the end of the year with the NDAA.
Oh my goodness.
It's like, come on, like it's crazy.
Yeah.
One thing that I did pick up on, Steph, as well, that you said was you mentioned paranormal again, and I think we've seen a lot in the last year or two that these connections are being made now between the paranormal aspect of things, the kind of esoteric, and the kind of nuts and bolts. So I'd like to know how each of you guys feels that. And I'm not asking for the answers or the actual like this is the relationship, but like, you know, I think a lot of people have seen it, so I just like your guys' take on it.
Agreed.
Whoever.
And yeah, and there's these amorphous type things that we cannot explain that we're trying to piece together, right? And then we have our Pricilla, where she specializes in those things, and then also has been a witness to a UAP. So the more conversations that we have, I can say that there's definitely some sort of a connection. I can say my sister was a witness to UAP. After we had witnessed it a couple years later, she did have some sort of an auditory illusion of an uncle whom had passed. So he was calling her name. And my sister doesn't follow all of this stuff. She's a total square. She's into software. She's just like, yes, I'll for sure tell you guys what had happened again. But, you know, she's not, you know, doing what we're trying to do here is I would like to call us trailblazers. I've had another witness who had witnessed an orb over a cornfield. It blazed past him. It was the color green, which is different. We see all these different colors of orbs. Most of them are going to be orange, but it left no sort of trail of dust or dirt or anything such as that. It just blazed by. And then soon after that, the witness had seen an image of his grandfather whom had passed, which I think is, you know, how do you put all of these events together from different people, you know, and people you're related to, and then total, you know, I call them, they're friends now, you know, that's what this platform is for. So, you know, if you don't share it, then how are we going to put this piece of the puzzle together? So Pricilla, what do you?
Oh yeah, everything you said, and it's common. And before I was actively like switched everything to Instagram, I was doing metaphysical and meditation type classes with my other friend, and we had like a business of it. We made little spiritual kits, whatever. But you know, I did like a starseed September, right? Which I know people cringe at that term, especially the more nuts and bolts people. But it is something, it is a group of people that still needs to be acknowledged that read about that sort of thing. And it's also a fun thought experiment to think about where are these different ships coming from. But the one thing I can tell you is people that have had sightings that I've met just throughout my life before trying to offer a safe space, which is kind of what my channel is about. Well, part of it, besides books, the people would come to me. They would just come to me and be like, hey, like, I know you're not going to judge me. I saw grandpa, right? Like I'm giving my kids a bath and grandpa popped up. He's been dead for a while. Or the dream thing really fascinates me because it taps into the subconscious. And then that opens up other questions like Jacques Vallée's book, Messengers of Deception. Like how do they tap into our consciousness to help us experience, or for us to experience or process them however we see it, right? Is that our brain operating in its limited capacity, or is it them actually projecting these things that we're registering as a reality? And then you get into the paranormal stuff. Does seeing a spirit, a chupacabra, a yeti, or a UFO suddenly open up your energetic feelers so you're more aware? Are you kind of stuck in this like ultra hypervigilant state after that? So that's why you notice more? There's just so many questions, and that's kind of the part that gets me. And I do believe that there's a lot of physics that we may start understanding that is going to explain a lot of this, including the woo, including the nuts and bolts, and it's going to marry them.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with that, Priscilla, especially when you're talking about having an experience. I think a lot of people are, we're taught from a very young age of what is what, right? We're taught this is what should be, this is what not supposed to be. So if you see a ghost, you're not really seeing a ghost, it's not really there, they're not real.
Right.
So I think all along, like in life, most people have like a like kind of a wall or a shell up, or even like a helmet on. Like they just don't realize that they have been taught to zone these things out and not pay attention. But a UFO, I think, is what cracks open that shell completely. Because if somebody sees something out of the flash corner of their eye, they kind of don't pay attention to it. Because I worked in paranormal for almost 20 years. And so I don't think they really pay attention. If they see shadow figures, they're like, oh, that could have just been my eye. That could have been something, whatever. They try and explain it away, as we all do as adults, right? But as kids, we're innocent. We're like, oh my God, I just saw grandpa. Let me tell you what he said. We don't have a barrier like that yet. But when you see UFO, something that cannot be explained away, I think it truly cracks open that shell that we carry. And then all of a sudden, now we're way more open. We're way more open with our energy, with everything around us, to where now we are having these experiences, because now we're starting to see the world a little bit differently. So I think it does have a major impact. And I've noticed it a lot, like you were saying, and like Steph was saying, with people that have had experiences. I mean, I've seen UFOs myself very up close. I had a triangular experience that was like right above my head. It was very, very, very weird. But when you have those experiences, you can't forget it. You don't poo-poo it away. It was what it was. And then all of a sudden you start looking at the world very different. You're like, okay, well, if this is real, then maybe aliens really are real, like, okay, let's figure this out. Maybe the Egyptians weren't lying. There's, all these different races, like you start like putting stuff together, right? Because all of a sudden things are open. But that's something I encourage when I have witnesses come to me. I tell them all the time, just because you've seen this, be aware now that you might start being more open to seeing things, and don't be scared of it. The world around us is it's deep, and nobody explains it. We're only at, basically the surface, day-to-day life, but beneath it is so many things, especially when science comes out and talks about we're living in 6 different dimensions, and they know that now scientifically. So it's like, well, that's insane. What are these other dimensions? And we don't know yet. But the fact that science now has come out and spoke about that, it really also helps you look at the world and go, okay, we're not in the 50s anymore. We're allowed to talk openly about this, which is fantastic.
No, absolutely. And I think that, for most people who start nuts and bolts, right, there's almost this evolution where, I'm not saying this is absolutely the answer, because no one knows the answer, but I think you go down a path where you eventually come to consciousness, right? And what role does consciousness play, either in the manifestation, the presentation, the initiation of these events? And I think that's where a lot of people who are turned off by the woo don't realize that, a lot of people don't start there, right? It's after a lot of research and a lot of understanding of different traditions that you can kind of find the way there that, like Pricilla said, marries the two, not supersedes the other one. And one of the things I've always wondered, so I'm unique from all 3 of you in that, like, I've had a ton of paranormal experiences my whole life. Not so much UAP experiences. I've had some weird experiences during meditation that I don't know how to categorize, but I've never seen a craft. And so one of the things I've always wondered about too is I think there are people who act sort of, as Gary Nolan's said, lighthouses, right? That, like, for whatever reason, having these experiences turn something on, whether they're attracted to you or your perception is opened. But I've wondered why some people see physical craft, physical beings, things like that. Other people have these more esoteric, like out-of-body experiences. And I've always been very curious if that is due to dual nature of these things, if it's due to some people have to be contacted in different ways, right, in order to kind of get the message across or the contact across. But I'd be curious to hear what you guys think about that.
Who wants to go?
I only caught the last part because I had to go deliver snacks. So, but yes, I caught the last part. So I'll let you guys go first, and then I'll see.
I'm definitely curious, Katie, to know, why are certain people being zeroed in on? Why are they being chosen? Also, they seem to be hanging out near, military zones and installations, and so there's definitely a connection there. And I know, Brit, you go and you've done your research near Catalina, which is right next to San Clemente Island, where there's tons of military stuff being conducted as far as amphibious, helicopters, and we've had helicopters actually crash, and we've had different types of vehicles, such as an amphibious one, crash as well. And it's hard to talk about but it's real. And the thing is if they're altering, say, nuclear mechanics, is there a potential for them to be able to alter other forms of mechanics, which have been spoken about? So it's a definite concern that, we need to know, is there a reason why they're zeroing in on our, military craft, not only our civilians and our people who are starting to come forth, which is promising and great. And we need to provide these platforms for them to speak on. But why are these certain individuals and installations being chosen? So yeah, that's kind of what I have on that there. It's very interesting. It's concerning.
It always fascinates me with the military bases, because I almost feel like they're almost stopping us from ourselves in a lot of cases when it comes to missiles. And I have footage that was sent to me on some bases over the years where they were doing testing, and these things would just shoot out of the sky and come and like literally observe and then just leave. And they're like, it's like they felt as if they were being watched on purpose to make sure they weren't doing something that was detrimental. And I'm like, you could go the far extreme of it and go, well, if they tried to teach us many, many, many years ago, and they saw that we were just going to end up hurting ourselves and making the same mistakes they did, I could see them trying to protect this planet, tell us how to protect it. But we don't really know the whole purpose of why they're here. There could be hundreds of reasons. One reason that I lean a lot towards is there is substance and minerals that they need from our planet for themselves, for wherever they're from. And I think that a lot of times that is why, like that whole Channel Island, Catalina Island, all of those islands there, the activity is insane. I mean, it would be like a 10-hour show. It's absolutely absurd, but it only leads me to believe that they are trying to gather stuff for whatever reason. And they just want us to do the best to take care of this planet in the best way. Kind of like, look, guys, I'm trying to stop you from yourself because this could go bad. Don't do what we did, kind of thing. That's one theory that has been out there. And it does make a lot of sense when they come around a lot of the bases, and you're like, it just makes sense.
I totally agree with that. But my other question is how much of this interference is on purpose? And I'm not talking with the nuclear facilities, because that definitely seems like catch your attention. Like you're doing this to one of the biggest powers in the world or whatever, on their home base where nobody messes with us, right? Or the United States there. So that one definitely seemed like it was purposeful. But how much of the other stuff is on accident or as like almost like a side effect, kind of like what Gary Nolan is studying with the brain, or when the Mantell incident where he chased it, or even in some Foo Fighter incidents where they chased it, So to me, that's kind of interesting. Are they actually, some of the stuff that they're doing, I'm sure is purposeful, but how much of it isn't? How much of it is just kind of like a residual thing of like them just being them, whoever they are.
Coincidence.
And the mineral and resource thing is definitely key. And hey, if you guys know, if they're listening, if you guys know how to use salt water, please share your secret, because we need.
Please.
What are you using it for? The technology that could be possible for us as a human race or humans in general is something that I feel like we would like to know about, even though maybe we don't deserve it. We destroyed all our chances, or maybe we're just not there yet. Maybe we would turn the salt water into money, right? Somehow and sell it, But it does make me wonder why so many are in the oceans. And then that brings up the other question is, have they evolved alongside with us? Like some people think and I'm with you, Brit. Like I think some come from other places in the solar system. I think some may have been here with us because we look at our ancestors all over the world and they've been having experiences as well. And then also you had to bring in the whole ultra-terrestrial theory. You're talking about dimensions. Right. There's the whole many worlds theory that is just like you try to fathom 6th dimension. Holy cow. Some of these theories go up to like 12. So it's just more questions. And do you guys feel like the more you learn, the less you know and the more questions you have.
Oh,
You're-
yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh
So-
yeah.
Yeah. All the time.
I think you have to go in with that perspective. Like anyone who the longer they've been in here thinks they know more, that's like the automatic red flag, right?
Yep.
You just avoid those people. I like the people who say, I have no idea what the hell is going on. But I want to go back for 1 second before I dive into ultra-terrestrials, because I could talk about that for hours. I think there's also a comparison to what's going on too with what we do with our allies and adversaries. We go and we buzz over and we keep an eye on what people are doing. It's basic intelligence gathering,
Yep.
So whether that's for nefarious purposes or not, I mean, if you were trying to gain information, what would you do? You would buzz our military installations. You would try to keep an eye on what we're doing, what tests we're doing, what capabilities our experimental aircraft have, things like that. I also think one of my biggest pet peeves with the UAP community is generally when people assume a singular motivation with like the government or like a singular perspective. And I think we have to be very careful not to do the same, right? There may be some policy or goal interacted by these various species, groups, but that doesn't mean that they're all acting 100% within that framework, right? So there could just be random people going off and doing their own thing as well. So I think that was really important to what Pricilla said. But yeah, I also think that I think what really interested me was in Pricilla about our ancestors. And I think that's one of the things we really need to give credence to is, a lot of times white people have a tendency to come in and be like, hey guys, look what we discovered. And we have our indigenous people who have been saying for thousands of years, like, no shit, right? Like we carved it on rocks for you. We embedded it in our myths, we did all of these things. And I think if we're going to, decolonize this field a little bit, we have to really take seriously some of those stories, and not just out of a desire to be good to people, but because there's a lot of truth and a lot of value and a lot of insight that we don't have yet. And so that's why I think that I'm really happy to see that we're starting to move in that direction. And I think we definitely need to bring in some more indigenous voices and some voices who have, like Brit said, history on like the Egyptian myths and whatnot, and try to dig into those more deeply.
Yeah, agreed. Very well
agree.
said.
I know-
I've seen people do that. But unfortunately, it's the people with the money and the Hollywood, and we've seen it done on Ancient Aliens, and then it becomes part of stigma, like the hieroglyph of the it looks like a gray. I can't remember where it's from right now. It's slipping my mind, but unfortunately, it's sort of been abused in that way. So I think that another interest and another point that gets overlooked is we've got plenty of people working on the nuts and bolts, and we have so many people pushing for, more public hearings, more world governments kind of getting involved in making that policy. But what we are missing out on is the history that we might be overlooking. And I know people are like, well, I'm sick of hearing the same case over and over again. But every time somebody looks at it with a fresh eye, I think that something gets interpreted differently, which could be good or bad. But, but we need fresh eyes on this. I love the people that have been doing this forever. They paved the way. They put so much work in. They've been so much passionate. They've been brave to talk about it when most of us were like a lot of us were like, oh my gosh, I won't talk about this, I'm afraid, they've been fearless. So that's great. Thank you. But I think the more people we get in here kind of reassessing what we've seen in ancient cultures, plus what we've been seeing in present day, like what Brit is studying and what Steph is studying with experiencers, and you with your government experience, not experiment. Oops, gave it away. You're a government experiment. But I think that that's something that we have to keep doing it. I know it seems redundant for people to keep going back and saying like ancient history says this case happened. Like it's important to revisit that. Because there's something new. Look what happened with people still studying the Calvine. Like if you guys gave up on that, we wouldn't see that photo, whether we think it's a spaceship or government tech. We still have the photo now. And that's something new that that if you give up on something, you might never get, or if you don't re-examine it, you will not get it. So,
right.
I agree. I think my biggest problem is the history. That was even in the congressional hearing too, when asked about historical records from 70s and 60s and 80s. I mean, even current, And they were just like,
We didn't look.
Never heard of Maelstrom.
Tim Burchett,
Yeah.
tune in
Oh,
now.
Gallagher got
Tune
him
in
on
now.
that one. I was
Oh,
like,
Gallagher's
let's
a beast.
go, Gallagher. you know?
Gallagher, oh my gosh. I was just like, we were all
I was so
watching it
happy.
live and we were just like, yes. Like, I was not
Mhm.
expecting that from him.
But you know,
Oh.
I was really upset, and I will interject and say this. I was mad at the fact that they have these two representatives who I know were just given a script. We know how this works. Here's what you're allowed to say. That's it. We're not, if you're asked another question, you just say, well, we will look at that and we'll get back to you at a later date. That's just your go-to, right? But what
Sure.
pissed me off, especially as a ufologist, and my mentor is Don Schmitt, who is like king of Roswell. They're like, this is really passionate to me. You know, this is, we have got to make this happen, because when those legends are gone, what happens? When all of those stories are gone, those journals are now packed away in vaults. What happens to these people's lives and the legacies that they had? It's up to us as the new ufologist to keep that candle burning for all of them. And I'm a J. Allen Hynek girl. Like, I'm trained in the Hynek way, and that's how I will be. So I feel like I have to carry his torch with Don and with them, you know? And so it made me so mad when they're like, so was there any other investigative, you know, programs prior to Project Blue Book? And they both were like, no, there was not. And I about choked on my water, because I was like, do they, come on, guys. Like, you could Google it. Right. Thank you. Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, you could literally Google it. Like, you could pull out your phone right now and be like, I don't know. Can you give me a second? I'm just going to pull it up.
But they weren't allowed to Google it.
No, I know. But I'm sitting there going, this is absurd that you have two people representing this new division of investigative UAP work. And it's like, you can't even legitimately know the history. So in order to move forward into future or current times, or somebody comes to you and says, hey, I had a sighting. Like, imagine if somebody came to Steph and Steph didn't know stuff, or know crafts, or know shapes, or know location hotspots. So if they came to Steph and they're like, hey, I had this sighting. This is what it looked like. This was the speed. This was the trajectory. This is how it moved. And it was this time of night. What do you think it was? And she was just like, you know, I don't know. I'm going to have to, I'll get back to you. I'm going to look into that, you know, and I'll let you know. And it's like, what?
Right.
No, you should have a go-to immediately in your brain, have a file and go, you know, what's really funny is what you're describing is a case that I remembered from 1978 that happened in Mexico.
Right.
You need to be able to freaking pinpoint that stuff to help these people. And that is something that's not happening. So if you're going to call yourself an investigative team out of the, you know, government, you got to know your stuff. And it's not just what happened from 2017 and on. We need to go back. You have to know the history to move forward into the future, and including ancient history. I mean, I have stuff that is like written in what looks like old journals. We're talking from like the 11th century of someone writing about a light that formed in the water and guided them to land when they were lost.
Wow.
That is not bioluminescence. Bioluminescence is like, hey guys, I'm going to lead you. Follow this algae that glows in the dark.
Follow that, everyone.
That's communication, essentially.
Yeah,
I
well,
love this
contact.
Of a jelly.
Of bioluminescence. A+.
But it's similar to the pilots, right? Like those, okay, we think about 18th century, we think like they don't have all this cool equipment, whatever, they don't have sonar, but they had their eyes, and these men were out there for months, years, traveling the sea. You think they're going to get confused about a glowing jellyfish or bioluminescent mass of algae traveling around? Same thing with the pilots. Like my son is 5 and he's been able to point out Saturn and Jupiter since he was 4, at least. You think some guy in the sky is going to be like, oh, that's Venus, I'm going to follow it? I think it's, you know, like.
But, you know, if somebody actually knew the history, which like Pricilla, you know this, and I'm sure all of us know this. If you know the history of how these guys sailed, that was the way of transportation. Okay. That's how they got around. We didn't have the fancy technology then. They actually based their travels off the solar system. The stars guided their way. So they knew the solar system better probably than anybody at that time, if they weren't on a vessel. So if they see something that all of a sudden moves like a broken leg in the sky and takes off, I think they're going to know, you know, they're not going to be like, oh man, Mars is drunk tonight. What's going on? You know, that's not how it works. You know what I mean? So it's like, I don't know. I just get so frustrated with it. So it's like, you have to know this history. The Mayans talk about this. You can actually read about contact through the Mayan people. Think about that. That's incredible. Why that isn't being added into the research of current right now within our government is insane. It needs to be. It needs to be spoken about. I mean, spoken about. It's just insane to me. And you're right. Indigenous people need to come forward. And I want to hear what they have to say, because I talk to them all the time regarding Sasquatch. And I mean, this is the type of stuff. It all comes together. It all comes together. We all have to be able to be vocal about it. It's just insane.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
and
something
part
I
of knowing
found. Go on, Steph. Go on.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, I know Pricilla has spoken upon, your ancestors, time travelers. I mean, there's a myriad of types of people that are visiting us. We've heard of ET, of course, but there's so many other, avenues that we've been exploring that we're finding out about. And not only that, but Britt, I wanted to touch on, these experiences that these people have been, giving you these testimonies on, is that they've been living with this trauma for years also. So think about our ancestors whom have suffered through that trauma. I mean, it's not all good. So it's like, there's definitely all of these different types of beings that are visiting. There needs to be a certain literature that's put in place for people. And I do want to say, there is a colleague of mine that has put together, it's UAPMC, MC is for Medical Coalition, and it's going to serve as what you're basically describing. So it's a free forum right now. You just sign up, you put on your name and your password, and you basically can find out historical issues, diagnosis, multiple witness situations, psychology discussions, publications. So there's all of these things that people can go to as a forum, not only for, say, a treatment plan, but doctors need to understand, how do I treat a person whom has witnessed a UAP? Right. So none of that's in place either. And I get just as hyped up as you do about, people needing to understand the past. So there's all of this will marry together, as Pricilla had mentioned earlier. And, hopefully the right people are listening in on this conversation, because I really, truly don't think that one has been had to this degree, to be honest. So
no, yeah. No, you're right.
Very cool.
I just want to give a shout out to everyone in the chat. I have been seeing your questions, and I've popped a few of them that we're going to get to in a little bit. But just following on from what we were just discussing, is another aspect that I've only in the last sort of 6 to 8 months been focusing on a little bit more and more, is the religious aspect and the historical connections there. With the work of Diana Pasulka really opened it up to me. And I mean, I spoke to her about a case involving St. Francis of Assisi, seeing, these golden orbs and stuff. And I've been looking more and more into that sort of thing more recently with the apparition side of things, with Fatima and Lourdes and stuff. And I find that really seems to be you can make connections. It kind of makes sense. So what have you guys kind of come across when it comes to religious sort of aspects of the phenomena?
From an experiencer standpoint, I thought I was seeing angels my whole life when I was having these visitations and they amped up after seeing the things in the sky, the UFOs. So this whole time I'm having these beautiful, like, religious experiences. I'm growing up Catholic, so I'm learning about these, these saints that had these similar experiences. I'm like, I'm being visited by angels. Well, getting further down this rabbit hole and talking about it more and kind of making it more my focus, I'm like, what have I actually seen? What was that? And so many people have described these beings that look a certain way, and come to think of it, it's like they didn't have wings. It's a being, it's an apparition, but it's glowing. It's like a shape. It's almost like the reverse of a shadow person sometimes. So just from an experiencer standpoint, that learned about Catholicism from an early age, because my family was Catholic, even though my grandma was into weird stuff. It was confusing. It got more confusing because you're learning about the saints and these angel visitations, right? And you're like, man, like that's not I'm not saying like that's happening to me on a saint level. I would not consider myself a saint, but but they've been visited by weird things, right? So like if something visits you in the night and it's glowing, what is it when you're growing up Catholic? An angel. Well, and even if from the Native American standpoint, it's a good spirit because it's glowing, it's not hurting you. Yeah. Right. And then the more creepy ones are what? Demons. Like if it scares you, it's a demon. And then also, is it scaring you because it's just unfamiliar. Is it, or it's not like jumping out and going boo, you know what I mean? Or creepy, you know? So there's, again, more questions, but just from that standpoint, people have been seeing glowing beings for a very long time across very many different religions, Hinduism, all the gods, all, you know, the things that people paint in the sky from old Renaissance paintings.
Oh yeah.
Stuff like that.
Oh yeah. For
No,
sure.
absolutely. And I think what you're getting to is that a lot of religion is also about our words, our vocabulary for things, and the ability for, you know, one person to interpret and see the exact same thing and interpret it in completely different ways based on their background and their lexicon. They have to kind of see that through reality. So I had like the opposite experience growing up basically as an atheist, right? And I think it's almost more alarming when that happens because you don't have any sort of framework for the anomalous, frankly, right? And so I've had this experience where I've kind of become spiritual, right? I'm now following Pricilla's path. Thank God for her guidance there. Where, you know, you suddenly, I think Brit mentioned earlier, you have this sudden awareness that your conception of reality is different. And I think that honestly, as we move more and more towards some sort of this like full blown disclosure, not that I think that'll come top down necessarily, I think it's going to be a lot harder on people who don't come from a background who have some sort of framework to interpret this from, right?
Right.
That, at least that's been my personal experience.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's
go ahead.
Go ahead, Steph.
Sorry. No, it's all you, girl. Go.
No, in this field, I get questioned quite a bit on regards to, and I'm sure a lot of us have, is, you know, well, what if aliens come down, you know, then God's not real and, you know, all this different stuff. Right. And I grew up like Pricilla, I was Irish Catholic, you know, so I knew all this stuff, you know, so like for me, it's not, I guess for me, I looked at it more like, well, this is cool. We weren't the only planet God made. This is pretty badass. You know, it's like, I never really looked at it any differently than that, you know, like that's just how I perceived it. And I guess when that question started coming about and hearing people say, oh my God, if UFOs are real, then there's no such thing as God. And what does this mean? And, you know, and it's like on the religious aspect of it. And I guess it just confuses me as to why that has to go hand in hand like that, you know, especially when our own Pope now is talking openly about it. And there was a UFO that was actually seen above the Vatican and was photographed, you know, and so we have these things that have happened, and we have past popes that have talked about seeing UFOs and extraterrestrials and things like that. So when you have this type of history and you have the Vatican, who, man, I have so much stuff with the Vatican that it's insane, but it's like they do know stuff, but they also have to stay on the side of science. They can't just come out and all of a sudden be like, yes, UFOs are real. Everybody let it go. Let it go. It's been around forever, because then everybody's going to just be in an uproar because now the Vatican is saying it. But they try and stay mostly on the side of science. And basically, and I've come to learn from in-house from different fathers that now they accept the idea of ghosts, which was something that was never really considered or recognized before. And it has happened to many different priests during exorcisms where they have spoken to a passing soul that was not a demon that was trapped within the body. And they were using the body as a vessel to speak to help save their soul. So it's very fascinating to hear these things, because I researched a lot into, I research everything in regards to anything that has to do with paranormal. And so it, you know, the whole religious question is always so interesting to me, because I just never understand how it has to be so segregated to such extent, because you look at the Native Americans, you look at the Mayans, they all have their own religions, Egyptians, they all had their own gods and stuff like that, but they never thought about not talking about aliens or people from other planets. It wasn't a big deal. It was like, we still have our God and our gods, and there's all these other beings that we also know about, you know. And it's like, I don't get now why in this day and age, it's so like, well, if there's aliens, there's no God. It's Prometheus. The movie is real. It's like, no, it's not how it works, you know? I don't know, Steph, how do you feel?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I grew up kind of a hybrid of Christian and Catholic also. You know, you have some friends on one side and families on the other. And, you know, I've always been a spiritual person also. So, you know, having that said, I agree. I don't know why it does have to be, you know, brought up into this. But I think that when people do see these light beings and these holographic experiences that they describe, it does pose that kind of question as to well, why are people who are religious and not religious stating these testimonials that they have seen, say someone whom has passed? So I think that there is something to be said there. I mean, I'm totally confused by it myself. I'm like, well, I want to understand this. I want to place this together because there's a lot of connections that are being made. So yeah, it's I can't really say. Obviously, none of us can say what it is, but there's a connection for paranormal, you know, and that if that's an angel or a demon visiting people, then maybe that's what it is, you know. So
yeah, I don't know. It's tricky. I mean, I there's a woman who's actually Irish who sees angels. She can see them, seen them since she was a little kid. And her angel told her that when we die, we are higher ranked. We have more access to coming and visiting our loved ones whenever we want. And she said that her angel said, we're basically the workers. Our job is to take care of the planet, to take care of things. So it's like, it's very interesting because when you look into it, you're like, well, that's kind of cool. You know, we can come and go when we want. So it's like, maybe that's the case in some instances, you know?
So maybe when you leave the earth, it becomes a portal for you to visit your loved ones. I mean, because that's exactly. a couple of testimonials that I described earlier. Is these people had passed and then they came back, and I mean, why would somebody make something up like that? You have to listen, you have to speculate, and be open to, you know, what people are claiming. I do believe that there's other stuff going on also within the community. I mean, I don't want to say that there's a mental health crisis of any way, but I do think that there's a kind of crossover, and that's something to be understood also, especially from doctors, to understand, you know, these types of conversations that are being had. I mean, look, we have people who have notable experiences that have occurred, and then we might have other people that we might need to redirect elsewhere. And the website that I brought up earlier is something that, you know, hopefully is going to be, you know, placed out to the masses, and one day we'll have a better protocol for all of these experiencers to come forward and share. You know, my brother, he was schizophrenic, so he lived in another reality. You know, he heard voices. There were people telling him certain things that nobody understood. So, but we had very normal conversations with him to try and understand what he was dealing with. And therefore he went and we seek the proper treatment for him. So it's a very similar situation that's going on within this community. So, you know, keep the events coming. That's all I have to say, is just keep coming forward. It's, you know, nobody's here to judge you. The stigma it's been squashed. There's no speculation here. We want to hear what you have to say, and then direct you under the right path.
I have one question.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I have one question for all the girls and Vinny. You're included, Vinny. But I do have a question. You know, do you guys ever feel from your research? It's just something that I've personally experienced, and I say this because my son was recently diagnosed with Asperger's, and it's something that I've come to learn. Do you ever feel, and I know this may sound really crazy, but that we are meant to be dumbed down? So when people have, in your case, like your brother, schizophrenia, okay, my grandmother with dementia, you know, these certain cases that come forward, or people that have Asperger's even, or a certain spectrum on the autism spectrum, does it feel, because it feels to me, and I might just be the only one, but doesn't it feel as though we as a general race are being pushed to be dumbed down, to close off that inner intelligence or understanding or openness of what we're hearing, and we're being told that's not normal? Well, what if I'm normal, like I'm the one that's not normal and my son is normal, but we have bred that out, we have eliminated that, we have shut that off. And I'm curious if you girls feel, and Vinny, if you guys feel the same way that I do from my research. And if you read, and I know people laugh, but I do bring it up a lot about like the stuff in toothpaste and all these different things, these certain chemicals. And if you read the history of them and what it actually does to the brain, it's fascinating of how it can shift your chemicals, your internal chemicals, and the way you process things. And certain, you know, programs that you have to send your kids to, that just seems like, but why does he have to do this when, you know, you're basically saying, well, he doesn't have a chart for his intelligence of what he's actually capable of doing right now, but he needs to do what everybody else his age is doing. Well, but he's doing 3 years above his age. He's only 5. Why do you want him to come back down to a mentality of that when he's almost like at a 9-year-old grade level, but you're putting him at a 5? Why? So it just makes me wonder if we all can agree that it feels like they're trying to still dumb us down as a control. It feels like it's a control. The dumber we are, the easier we are to manipulate, to control.
Yeah, I agree with you completely, and I'll be really quick. I just think, especially in the Western world, it doesn't fit into what's considered to be the normal lifestyle of working a 9 to 5, working until you're 75 and retiring, and we're just so ingrained in living in that materialistic society nowadays that we've lost, like you said, we've lost what it means to be human, maybe even, or what intelligence actually is. So yeah. That's all I got to say on that. I completely agree that it seems that we've been dumbed down.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's intentional.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Steph.
Katie, you went first.
Oh, no, I was gonna say, I don't even know if it's an intentional, but also if you just look at like evolutionary biology, there are certain things that we have to tune out, right? We have so much sensory input coming into us at any one time that in order to literally function in reality, we have to shut different parts off. And whether that's learned, which parts we shut off, and not, I think is very interesting. I think it's fascinating that young children are much more open to reporting past lives, apparitions, anomalous experiences, and then we're kind of conditioned away from that. But I think it's definitely a matter of at least one part of it, our biology as well.
Yeah, and I mean, our brain functions at only 10%. So imagine, they have studied in kids that are autistic that their brain function is higher. They use more percentage of their brain. So I think that scares a lot of what is supposed to be norm, because how do you train or teach somebody to be normal when you know that they're not? They're actually, that's their normal, and it's us that have to learn to coexist with them because they're smarter than us, and it's like, if we continue to have that kind of intelligence, that what could we do? So I think it's fascinating, and I just feel like sometimes we're just, I don't know, just feels very odd, especially when you learn about like school systems and how it actually started, how it became very mandatory in the early 1900s instead of people actually teaching their kids at home, and the structure of the percentage of intelligence was much greater and much higher, but they needed to control more of how the process was and how the teaching was done, and how the general idea of what the kind of what they needed to be presented and what everybody needed to know all at one time was done by the way that the system needed to be given. And how do you do that? You in-house everyone into one building and you teach them a curriculum a certain way. And then there is no outside teaching. So it just seemed like if you look into it, it just seems very weird. And I think that conditioning is also being done within house with paranormal, aliens, UFOs. It's been happening since Roswell. What you saw, you didn't see. It just happened recently with the new logo that was out for like 4 days, and they took it down. They're like, you didn't see anything. That was just an error.
Yeah, they basically said my bad, and they just kept going.
Exactly, and it's kind of like the same thing with Roswell. It's like, oh, our bad, but if you tell anyone this, you're all murdered. It's like It's the same thing. It's just in a new time frame. So it's a conditioning. It's a control of how they need to put stuff out and have an understanding of their public.
Yeah.
Well, humans have this little habit where once our physical body doesn't function the way that society says it should, or in a way that is easier for people to understand that something is wrong, right? Like with autistic children, I think they're beautiful. And I think that this world is just, I think that they are we're seeing more and more children being diagnosed now, whether that's diagnosis going up because of better tests, we don't know, or is it the environment? But this environment is not for people that don't have the mechanism to shut off everything. And like you said, maybe we're not supposed to shut off anything. And it's just, does that open them up? We talk about people with schizophrenia and dementia. Is that giving them this extra, are they getting their senses back to where we were before we had to start zoning out and tuning out all this EMF stuff, before our bodies had to just deal with processing artificial things that we don't really know the long term? Because think about all the stuff in our food is fairly new when it comes to the human race. And then also cars, planes, all this noise around us. has kind of made us have to drown out a lot of things. And because of that, are we inadvertently drowning out things that people that cannot drown it out or block it out are able to see, like autistic people or Alzheimer's people? Maybe they're coming to the end of their life, and that's like the first stage of entering like the spirit realm. And it just turns what we have turned on, they have off. So maybe they're perceiving more, or maybe it's like a whole nother level of hyper perception or hyper vigilance that they have that enhances their senses in other ways that we don't understand. And that plays into the phenomena because the phenomena, the way it works with us, it seems, is very outside of this Newtonian world that we know, live in, and trust and rely on. It's what if the absolute is completely just bonkers, and they're seeing what the absolute reality is versus what our brain is kind of making sense of the best that it can. And I agree with Katie that it's a survival mechanism, because what if there was a book I was reading, I'll have to put it up. He says if we didn't process reality the way we do, we wouldn't have survived, because we'd be lost to like an entropic soup. so I'm like, sweet, I like entropic soup because it's fun, but but I just think that they might have the advantage when it comes to paranormal, and because they're not like closed off like us. We had to fight our way back out, right? We had to have something crack us open, like a paranormal experience or a UFO experience or a Sasquatch, or sometimes both, right, at the same time.
Sometimes.
but yes, I do think that it's easier for people, especially the way we've engineered the world, to kind of be dumber and not as perceptive to like actual reality. And this might include beings from other places,
right?
Things in the sky that may be cloaked that we don't even notice, they might just be hovering around us right now, or in the water.
Right.
You might swim by them, surf by them, and you just don't see it.
Right. Just be accepting to these things. We need more acceptance right now, especially in the UFO community.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That leads me on to a question from Lara. Hey, Lara, good to see you. Lara says, as a female, what one thing would each of the panelists like to see happen or change within the UFO UAP community? Great question.
Where to start? I'm just kidding.
How long you got?
Yeah, exactly. Who's going first?
Double standards. I'll go really quick because I think mine's pretty straightforward. Even though I just stopped talking, but the double standard. So whenever there's a woman that presents herself, like Katie had posted something about her schedule for this week, and somebody had said, "Oh, what makes her qualified?" Blah, 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 whatever they said. But here's the thing: like if an OG, like not to say Danny Silva's qualified because of his work, or like if any other man posted that new to the topic, people just like embrace them, like, oh, this guy knows stuff, man. Like he's such a deep thinker. But if a female steps out of her mind without credentials, then you're automatically a piece of crap. Or if your credential is like humanities and you're trying to comment on nuts and bolts stuff, they'll be like, well, you're not an expert. When I think that it's funny that nobody is an expert when it comes to this. Even we think of the most brilliant people, they're an expert in their realm, but they don't know. Do you know what I mean? So the double standard of a man can pop up, say whatever he wants, and he'll get a following automatically, whereas a female has to be subject to, oh, she's trying to look a certain way to get through to people, or she's too sloppy, do your hair. Like it always goes back to the look. So I would like to see people kind of actually listen to what we have to say before judging based on the way somebody looks or the fact that they're a female and you did a quick glance of their bio, because I guarantee you some of these people that don't put everything on their bio that they actually know. And if you actually ask them, you might learn something about them. Like the same thing with Katie. I'm going to go back to you as an example because I've seen you attacked the most recently. And they're like, somebody said that you're like mean to experiencers. And then it was like, Katie has had experiences, but if you would have asked her that, you would have known.
Right.
And also she's not mean to experiencers. I'm just saying, like, there's the whole double standard of you have to fit these criteria to speak if you're a woman, but if you're a man, you could just show up like whatever and run your mouth and think, I think this, and then people will automatically give you like 1,000 like thumbs ups or follows or whatever you're looking for to boost yourself, I guess.
Yeah, well said.
I'm trying to not swear. Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, the one thing that always gets me, and this is even outside of the UAP community, but it happens here a lot. Stop with the damn manels. Like, I'm serious. I every UFO conference I want to go to, there's the ones I've almost bought tickets to, that I look at it and there's 20 men on your poster, and I'm like, I'm not going. You know, and that's not to say that those men aren't very qualified, aren't very interesting, but there are a ton of women, and I'm not talking about me. I'm not even talking to people in this room necessarily, you know, who have incredible perspectives. And I think as organizers, you know, this is why, hats off, any, you know, you have to intentionally make a choice to make your events more representative. That includes women, that includes people with disabilities, that includes Indigenous folks, that includes folks whose first language isn't English, because there's a lot of UAP experts that are not from the UK and the US. And I think that, you know, if we want to understand what's going on, we're not going to get to a new era of understanding by rehashing the same people over and over and over again. And so I think that's so important. And I'm going to just add one more thing, because someone said this to me yesterday and it pissed me off. There's a perception, sorry, can you tell I'm passionate? There's a perception that I've had repeated to me on several occasions, that if you're a woman, you automatically have an easier way through in this this community. That there's so few of us that if you're a woman, you just happen to be given more opportunities or more space. And I call bullshit to that, because I think the women who stick around here are the ones who by default have had to develop a very thick skin. And so, you know, for those who see that happening, you know, step in, call it out, you know, don't let it go. I'm not saying cause more drama, but just shut it down. And I think that's what's really important in these situations.
I don't want to offend anybody, but and I hope that I don't, and I hope no one takes this the wrong way, not in this group, but just anyone listening. My biggest, I agree, and I second everything Pricilla and Katie said, hands down. And I want to add to that posers. And by posers, I mean people that don't know anything about the field, but they know it's a niche that sells. And so all of a sudden they get asked to make appearances, or they get asked to go do things, or they get asked to be a part of these things. And then when asked the serious down to the nuts and bolts questions, they don't know it, because all they've done is just Googled a couple of things to make a cool Instagram or TikTok account. And, you know, I can tell from everybody here, from the research I've done with the group here, and then my own research, there are legitimate, and I say this like so passionately, but truly geeked out people in this field, because we've had experiences on the paranormal. I've had paranormal, I've had Bigfoot, I've had all different types of experiences, and it's all led me to where I am today. And I'm passionate about it, and I love it, and I want to carry that torch. It's in my soul, and I want my kids to do it. My son knows the Bigfoot call. It's going to happen. So I just get really mad when I see, especially women, because they do try and do this to look cute on Instagram, and they have their little alien doll and they think it's so funny. But it's like, you know, I love what you guys are doing, but you're not actually doing us any good. You're making us look stupid as a female in the ufology community. And what we're really doing is a lot of behind the scene work that we don't post about. Like if I don't post for a couple of days, it's because I'm swamped with actual UAP work that's coming into my emails and coming into my phone. And these people are just posting like 3 reels a day of like ridiculous UFO stuff. And I just don't want that anymore. Like step aside and let the real people that are doing this hardcore and they really have a passion for it and they really love it, and there's an interest for whatever reason, step forward and have a voice. And then, you know, find another niche, find something else, so that the serious women can finally be seen and recognized and put onto these panels in larger locations, and be a louder voice for sure.
Agreed. And also, you're all, sorry, I didn't know if you're wrapped. I totally agree with you. And to speak on what you spoke on earlier, I wasn't able to chime in on that, but also changing the algorithm to what kids are seeing, and even adults, I think, is also having a big effect on, you know, just developing as a person. And, you know, we need to continually develop as individuals. So I just wanted to chime in on that. And, you know, not everybody has the finances to homeschool their kids the way that they want to either. So that's just another thing to speak on later. But Laura, hi, how are you? So glad to see you, by the way. Glad you're here. I think the most important thing right now is we need to have a proper identification, you know, program placed out to the public. That's the first thing. we've got so much to do down the line. We need people to know how to properly identify, and we can go down to, proper reporting. So let's know what we're looking at first, then we'll report. Otherwise, our people are going to get inundated with these calls from people describing a satellite and a weather balloon. So I think that needs to definitely be put into place. And I came from a logistics background, and I think that we need to take our steps in starting to, deliver what needs to be done. So that to me needs to come forth immediately. That's all I've got to say on both of those topics. But wonderful, wonderful views, ladies and Vinny. This is such a great room to be in. So I appreciate it, and I respect all that you all are putting forth towards the subject. So
same here, Steph.
All of you made some fantastic points there, and I'm really glad that you mentioned them, because I think sometimes people are afraid to speak out, whether that's some females that I've seen online, or even people defending them, or have been too afraid to, rattle the hornet's nest, as it were. Like, oh, I'm just going to scroll past and ignore it. And I feel like that's happened too much in the past as well. But I've seen more recently people have stepped up to defend, especially on Twitter. So I think we're getting there. I think we're getting there. That's for certain. And I think more conversations like this should happen across all kind of podcasts and YouTube channels, I think, and conferences, especially, like, Katie mentioned. So,
and don't be afraid to be a voice. Don't be afraid to say it. That's a big fear right now. People are so afraid because they're afraid they're going to get backlash or canceled. And it's like, so if you are, then you're doing something right. You've got to be a voice for everybody and put this out there. You just have to.
I think at the same time, people do seem to find the right crowd if they just look. Like we're all here, friends. We've all, come from different angles and areas and stuff, but we found a group where people are respected no matter what aspect of the phenomena they study, how they look at it, what they think of it. There are places where people can have disagreements and still be friends. I think we've proved that here today. I guess before we finish up, a good question or thing to say is, what advice would you give somebody new coming into the subject as a female or as a male? But
I'll go first. Stand your ground. Know the history. Do as much reading as possible. Don't rely on the internet to guide you as far as the real history or your facts. Like, dig into true documentations, read books by people that have done this, find out who were kind of the main figures that forged the way to begin with in ufology, study their work, and create your own investigative style from there. You don't have to mimic, you don't have to copy, but definitely stand your ground, because at first you will be targeted as, all different types of things, but if you stand firm in it and you bring really valid points forward, and maybe your own theories, people will start recognizing that you really are taking this seriously, and then there will be a nice respect that will follow. So just welcome to this community. You're welcomed by all of us. We definitely will not attack you, as some might. We will play nice.
Well said.
I think listen to your gut. When you're starting to get to know people, there's going to be red flags that go off at times, and pay attention to them and find a sanity buddy. I mean, I was very lucky in that early on I came in and I made friends with Vinny and a few other people that I was like, okay, I know I'm with good people who, I'm not saying you're perfect, but you have a good heart. And that's going to matter a lot, because when you are banging your head against the wall, you'll be grateful for that. And last but not least, just stay true to who you are. I mean, there's been times when I thought I was going to say things that were going to piss people off, and I was going to lose all my followers and whatnot. And the bottom line is, it doesn't matter. Just be you, and people are either going to like you or they're not. That's their problem. And that's where you can kind of make sure that you're at least operating from integrity for yourself.
Yeah.
Well said. I second that.
Agreed. Yeah,
Steph?
I agree with you, ladies. I would say there's a lot of different movies to watch. Moment of Contact is coming out. It was incredible. It was done incredibly well. A Tear in the Sky.
Yeah, the sky's
phenomenology.
fantastic.
There's a lot that you can just start by learning from watching these documentaries. And then, yeah, I always come forth as a skeptic, even though I have seen, I'm still skeptical of some videos that I've seen. So I think when you have these more, I think people who are doing the research, getting the scientific data, getting the facts, you will follow their lead and realize, okay, well, there's this kind of novelty side, and then we have this very real and serious side that needs to be, taken with some dignity and respect. So, don't ever feel like a fool or some type of a kook or whatever, because trust me, I mean, I've felt those ways in many different forums, but yeah, stick to your guns and we're here to learn. This is also informational. I think that that's something that needs to shift in our society, is that we do need to see more of videos that are informational, science-based, not, all just fun. And, cooking shows are great, and makeup is fun and all of that fun stuff. But we need kids to be feeding their brains. We need adults to be feeding their brains with something that you're going to learn from and exercise ideas from. So just keep an open mind. Keep an open mind. We're here for good. We're here for the good. And sorry, I just lost my shirt piece. Hi guys. We're here for the good. Just stick it out. Stick it out. We're not leaving.
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And I would just add, I agree with standing your ground, reading more, dig into the documents yourself. There's great resources. You don't even have to go on CIA anymore. You have a couple of great websites that have them all in one spot. The documentary Steph mentioned, I'm going to be putting out a top 12 must read book list that the book club and I kind of really thought about, because we've been wanting to do it for a while. That's going to be out. It's going to be a little bit of everything for books. Read the books. When you're looking on the internet, just double check everything. Approach it, like Steph said, like a healthy amount of skepticism. Yeah. And just, I think the biggest thing that I learned is you have a piece of the puzzle to this, whether you think you do or you not. Or you know what I mean? Whether you think you do or you don't, you have the piece of the puzzle. Because I remember when I first started, I would tell Vinny, I'm like, I don't know, man, I'm just a little fish in an ocean. He's like, stop saying that. Like, like you're just, a fish, a little fish, like we're all fish, right? So that, and whether you're the little boy that saw the light, if you're a Harvard professor that's the boss of astrophysics in the universe, Thanos, whatever, a little housewife on the prairie, like you still saw something, and it's real. Funny. If you're an experiencer, and you still have, if you have a passion about this, you have a role to play, and it's going to come to you. No matter how hard I try to stick with all the witchiness, I always end up back with this UFO stuff. Like always, it goes back to this weirdness. So it's not getting rid of me. I'm not getting rid of it. And we don't want to get rid of you if you care as much as us do. So, or as much as we do.
Exactly.
Love it.
One more thing I want to add. Study the space and the ocean.
Yes.
And by that, study the airspace, study, the programs that are out there, SpaceX, NASA, the different things that are happening that are being interjected into our space. Learn about space debris. So if you are using an eye vision, and you will know what each object is, you can actually identify it. Learn the programs that you can have on your phone, easy accessible, or on your tablet. So you can open it up and actually register and see what is around you at that time, whether it's an airline, there's a bunch of different types of apps. And then also learn the ocean. Learn the different sounds, what are natural sounds, what are not natural sounds, learn the vibrations, learn these things. So that way, if you are coming into ufology and someone says something about a pressure system within the sky, and it creates a different type of, there's actually massive mirages that happen within our own atmosphere in the sky. People think it only happens in deserts, but it happens in the sky with clouds. And learn these things. So if somebody comes to you, you actually can say, no, I actually think that's just a cloud formation. Let me explain why, so that you are, like Pricilla was saying, you are an active piece. You no matter what you think, you are going to be a huge active piece in this puzzle, and we need you. So do the studying. We need that help right now more than ever.
Yeah, absolutely. Really well said. Well, I cannot thank each and every one of you enough. This has been a really, really amazing conversation. I'm so glad we got it arranged and done. And I think we should do a lot more of these in the future, by all means. So yeah, I think that's it really. So everyone in the live chat, thank you all so much as well. It's been so much positivity. That was just really beautiful to see. So thank you. Megan T, thank you for the donation. I really appreciate that. But I just appreciate everybody being here and showing that we can have such a really nice, kind-hearted community, and we're all in it together. So yeah, once again, all of you, thank you so much. I'm sure we'll speak soon behind the scenes. Keep up the good work, every single one of you. You're all doing amazing things. And yeah, that's about it. Whoever's going, I think Pricilla, good luck at the weekend co-hosting the conference with Jay and James and Kelly. I know Katie, you're going to be there. Yeah, guys,
That's
again,
awesome.
thank you so much. I'm going to be back in a few days, and yeah, everyone go and follow. All the links for all of these wonderful ladies are in the description below. Go and follow them across all the social media platforms and everything else. For now, I think that's it. I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Goodbye.
Bye.